Haiti's government announced that at least 7 people have died from cholera, raising concerns about another potentially catastrophic outbreak. In Colombia, President Gustavo Petro meets with the Secretary of State of the United States, Anthony Blinken. In Libya, authorities reported the discovery of at least 42 bodies buried in a mass grave in the city of Sirte, territory controlled by an Islamic extremist group. Hello, welcome to From the South. I'm Luis Alberto Matos from the teleSUR studios in Havana, Cuba. We begin with the news. Haiti's government announced that at least 7 people have died from cholera, raising concerns about another potentially catastrophic outbreak like the one that broke out a decade ago and killed nearly 10,000 people. The cases came in a community called the Cayet in southern Port-au-Prince and the seaside town of Cité de Soleil, where thousands of people live in crowded, unsanitary conditions. Food or water contaminated with the cholera bacteria can lead to severe diarrhea and dehydration that can be deadly. The United Nations said in a statement that it is working with Haiti's government to gather an emergency response to the potential outbreak. The death came as a lack of fuel and ongoing protests shut down the availability of basic services across the country, including medical care and clean water, which is key to helping fight cholera and keep patients alive.
According to all the information we have, the number of deaths range from 7 to 8, and one death that happened in the course of today, unfortunately, was a person who died in the community. This is a problem when there are people who have diarrhea, vomiting, and have no way to get the person to the health center where they could survive. I will take the opportunity to ask the protesters that have the right to protest, but I ask them to allow potable, drinkable water and ambulances to go into neighborhoods they need to get to.
Hurricane Arlene hit Mexico's southwestern coast on Monday, making landfall in the Pacific state of Sinaloa as a Category 1 storm. In its latest public advisory, the National Hurricane Center said Arlene, with maximum sustained winds of 140 km per hour, weakened from a Category 1 storm before hitting land, and is expected to continue to weaken. The storm arrived on shore just north of the border between the states of Sinaloa and Nayarit, and was around 75 km southeast of the port city of Mazatlan. The National Hurricane Center also warned that Arlene could cause torrential rains and flash flooding, along with possible landslides. In the United States, nearly 100 people lost their lives after the passage of Hurricane Ian through the state of Florida. According to Florida authorities, the death spanned several Florida counties, including Lee County, Charlotte, Volusia, Collier, Sarasota, Manatee, Hillsborough, Lake, and Hendry counties. The causes of the death were mainly drowning, as well as 2 car accidents and a roof accident. More than 700 people have been rescued so far, while search and rescue efforts continue. The United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres asked world leaders to attend COP27, the International Climate Change Summit in Egypt next month, and step up their commitments to limit global temperature rise to 2 degrees Celsius.
We are weeks from the UN Climate Conference COP27 in Egypt. Starting today, government representatives are meeting in Kinshasa for the critical pre-COP that will set the stage. And the work ahead is immense. As immense as the climate impacts we are seeing around the world. A third of Pakistan flooded. Europe's hottest summer in 500 years. The Philippines hammered. The whole of Cuba in blackout. And here in the United States, Hurricane Ian has delivered a brutal reminder that no country and no economy is immune from the climate crisis.
We'll take a short break, but first, remember you can now follow us on TikTok account at teleSUR English, in which you will be able to see news in different formats, news updates, and much more. More news coming up. Stay with us. Welcome back from the South. The President of Colombia, Gustavo Petro, met this Monday in Bogota with the Secretary of State of the United States, Antony Blinken. Petro and Blinken discussed an agenda that highlights issues such as support for the full implementation of the ethnic chapter of the peace agreement and the re-establishment of relations with Venezuela. On his tour through Latin America, Blinken seeks to strengthen ties with the presidents of Colombia and Chile, as well as to address issues of migration and the situation in Ukraine in preparation for the next meeting of the General Assembly of the Organization of American States, to be held in Lima, Peru. The peace delegation of the National Liberation Army of Colombia announced its return to the country from Havana, Cuba, where it stayed for the last few years after the interruption of negotiations with the government. In a statement in their Twitter account, the delegation said that alongside guarantor countries like Cuba, Norway, and the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela, their return was carried out safely and with all guarantees. The National Liberation Army representatives also thanked the guarantor nations for their support, hospitality, and respect of international law. Meanwhile, the Venezuelan government welcomed the compliance with the protocols agreed between Colombia and the National Liberation Army. The return of the peace delegation followed the talks initiated last August between the representation of the Colombian government, led by Gustavo Petro, and the National Liberation Army to resume peace talks. Former President of the Spanish government, José Luis Rodríguez Zapatero, welcomed the upcoming reactivation of peace talks between the Colombian government and the National Liberation Army. Within the framework of his visit to Venezuela, Zapatero participated in a forum organized by Arturo Pietri Foundation. During a press conference, he considered that getting the guerrilla group to renounce violence is a great objective that will benefit citizens of both Colombia and Venezuela, especially in the common border. Meanwhile, he pointed out that this would cause other acts of violence to reduce or disappear. He also considered that Venezuela plays a very important role in this process that seeks to proclaim this continent free of political violence. In Colombia, another social leader, Juan Gabriel Rueda, has been assassinated Sunday night. His death was confirmed by President Gustavo Petro and by Senator Isabel Zuleta. In the last presidential elections, Rueda had worked as coordinator of the historic park campaign in the municipality of Salga. According to reports from the Institute for Development and Peace, Rueda had received threats during the campaign. Petro urged the Attorney General's office to speed up inquiries. Juan Gabriel Rueda was also a social, environmental, and political leader. Since the signing of the peace agreements in 2016, 1,362 social leaders have been assassinated in Colombia. For instance, last year, 33 social leaders were murdered according to a UN report. Colombia is the country with the second highest number of environmental leaders murdered in 2021. With 99.99% of the votes counted, former President Luis Ignacio da Silva has won the first round of the presidential elections by more than 5 percentage points against incumbent Jair Bolsonaro. In this first presidential round, Lula got 48.4% of the votes, while President Bolsonaro got 43.2%. The figures disclosed by the Superior Electoral Court anticipates a tiebreaker between the two candidates in the second electoral round to be held next October 30th. Brazil's National Electoral Tribunal President Alexander de Moraes, after announcing the results, praised the calm and discipline of Brazilian people while holding the elections and also acknowledged the low rates of abstentionism or blank vote. The President of Mexico, Andrés Manuel López Obrador, congratulated the people of Brazil on the recent elections and stressed that in that country there is no place for voices that speak of an alleged fraud. During his morning press conference from the National Palace, López Obrador stressed that Latin America lives in a true democracy where coups are no longer the way to obtain power. The Mexican president sent his congratulations to the winner of the first electoral round, former President Luis Ignacio da Silva, who obtained around 48% of the votes. He also congratulated the Brazilian people for carrying out an exemplary democratic day.
First, I want to congratulate all Brazilians, our brothers, because it was a democratic day. Exemplary. The fateful time of coup d'etats, of taking power by force, already in Brazil and in all America, is the democratic way that predominates. That is very important.
More news coming up after a final short break, so don't go away. Welcome back From the South. Libya's Missing Persons Authority announced on Sunday the discovery of 42 bodies buried in a mass grave in the coastal city of Sirte, a former stronghold of the extremist group Islamic State. In a statement, the authority reported that the bodies were exhumed at a local school site after an investigation with captured Islamic State fighters. Added that during 2 weeks of work, they are believed to belong to people killed by the Daesh ISIS terrorist group that took over the city during August 2015 until December 2016. On Monday, Lebanese top officials discussed the maritime proposals with U.S. envoy Amos Hochstein to solve the situation in the sea border with Israel. Since Lebanon and Israel have no diplomatic relations and their land border is patrolled by the UN, Lebanese President Michael Oun, Parliamentary Speaker Nabi Berri, and Prime Minister Najib Mikati agreed on a meeting and expressed their posture in the treaty. The Lebanese part confirmed their intentions to defend the unified position on Line 23 and the entire Kana field, a disputed oil and gas-rich area of some 860 square kilometers. According to analysts, for most Lebanese, the possibility of investing and exploiting their oil and gas wealth would ease the impact of the economic and financial crisis. The heads of the Lebanese state also pledged for a reply as quickly as possible from Israel. On Monday, the United Nations mission in Afghanistan updated the number of victims caused by a suicide attack that took place in a school located in an area populated by the Shiite Hazara minority in Kabul. The death toll rose to 53 and 110 were injured, according to this report. In the past days, women students had staged demonstrations to reclaim to the Taliban regime the lives of the children dead at the attack. The minority of Hazara have been a target of this kind of incidents since the actual government took power in the country. Also, the police had dispersed the protests using fire and saying that they had not coordinated with the administration. Nine people, including senior regional officials, were killed in twin car bombings claimed by Al-Shabaab in central Somalia, police said, as the government escalates an offensive against the Islamists. 2 cars packed with explosives were detonated minutes apart outside local government offices in Beledweyne, a city at the heart of recent offensive against Al-Qaeda-linked militants who control swathes of Somalia. The health minister of East Shabelle State and a deputy district commissioner were among the dead. Somali forces and international security partners have been waging an aggressive counterinsurgency in recent weeks, with the government announcing the killing of Abdullahi Jareh, a top Al-Shabaab operative, in a joint airstrike on Saturday in the south of the country. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov said President Vladimir Putin has already notified the United Nations General Assembly that he signed the agreements on Donbas territories in accordance with the procedures of the Constitutional Court.
In accordance with federal law regarding the incorporation into the Russian Federation, the formation of a new federal subject, the President has notified the General Assembly, the Russian government, the State Duma about the application made by these territories and that he signed relevant agreements with them. In accordance with established procedures, the Constitutional Court studied these agreements and has approved them.
Likewise, Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov said that with the unification of the new regions to Russia, the residents will get the right to Russian citizenship.
The agreements endorse the incorporation of new subjects into the Russian Federation, the Donetsk People's Republic, the Lugansk People's Republic, the Kherson Oblast, and the Zaporizhia Oblast. These agreements, these laws, give residents the right to Russian citizenship. On behalf of the President of Russia, I am addressing the State Duma with the proposal to pass these bills. I'm sure that this will be for the good of all residents of our country, our residents of the Donetsk and Lugansk People's Republics, and of the Kherson and Zaporizhia provinces. Thank you.
Inter and Barcelona will square off in a crucial Champions League Group C clash on Tuesday, but the two teams are entering very different states of form. The two clubs have 3 points after they both fell to Bayern Munich, but the Blaugrana stayed atop the La Liga Santander standings with rivals Real Madrid after cruising past Mallorca this past weekend. As for Inter, the Nerazzurri sit in 8th place in Serie A with 4 wins and 4 defeats after falling to Roma 2-1 on Saturday. Barcelona entered the match with several players unavailable to coach Xavi. As for Inter coach Simone Inzaghi, the Italian will be without Marcelo Brozovic and Romelu Lukaku. We've come to the end of this news briefing. You can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. You can also join us on social media: Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Telegram, and TikTok. For TeleSUR English, I'm Luis Alberto Matos. Thank you for watching.